You are not going to believe what happened at our family's Christmas dinner this year, December 25th, 2025. It's still surreal, and frankly, I don't know how I'm supposed to move past it. My father, the man I idealized, the stoic, decorated colonel retired, stood up after the turkey was carved, and with a look that was a terrifying mix of relief and devastation, he confessed a military secret he'd kept buried for decades, a secret that fundamentally shattered our entire family history and revealed that I have a half-brother I never knew existed. He told us, right there between the cranberry sauce and the mashed potatoes, that his entire military career, everything we thought was based on honor and duty, was predicated on a lie, a sacrifice. He made that involved another woman and another life he walked away from 35 years ago. I'm still reeling from the sound of my mother's porcelain plate shattering on the floor. Was I wrong for instantly feeling a profound sense of betrayal? Or is it understandable that this revelation has made me question everything I thought I knew about my father? Tell me if you would have done the same thing, because honestly, I need to know if I'm overreacting. This all began, as it always does, with the seemingly perfect facade of our annual Christmas celebration. My parents, Colonel and Mrs. Thompson, lived in this beautifully maintained, almost painfully respectable house in Connecticut. Dad, Marcus, was the epitome of the strong, silent type. He retired 10 years ago, but the discipline, the rigid sense of order, and the immaculate dress sense never left him. He had this framed photo on his desk of him shaking hands with a 4-star general, a photo I always looked at with such pride. My mother, Eleanor, was the elegant, devoted military wife, the kind who ran the local officers' spouses club and always hosted impeccable parties. My sister, Sarah, and I were raised with this bedrock belief in family loyalty and integrity. I'm 32, Sarah is 35, and we're both professionals. I'm a lawyer, and Sarah is a doctor. A testament, we always thought, to the stable, high-achieving environment our parents created. This year, we all gathered, along with Sarah's husband, Tom, and my partner, David. Everything was normal. Too normal in retrospect. The fire was crackling, the scent of pine and roasting turkey filled the air, and my father was going through his usual routine of telling us how lucky we were to have a peaceful, comfortable life. Thanks to the sacrifices he and his comrades made. He'd repeat the same war stories, the same lessons about courage and conviction. But this year, something was off. My father was quieter than usual. He kept staring into the middle distance, not with his usual stern focus, but with a kind of deep, internal anxiety that I'd never seen before. During the appetizer course, he excused himself and went into his study, which was highly unusual for him. He was the one who insisted on everyone being present and attentive during family meals. Mom just smiled tightly and made a joke about him needing to check on his fantasy football score, but I caught the slight tremor in her hands as she refilled her wine glass. Later, as we were moving to the dining room for the main event, I noticed him pulling a heavy, old wooden box out of his locked safe in his study. It was a lockbox I'd seen 1,000 times but never seen opened. It had a heavy brass clasp and looked like something from a classic spy movie. He quickly put it back, but the sight of it, coupled with his strange demeanor, left a knot in my stomach. The meal itself was beautiful. Mom had outdone herself, and we were all laughing, exchanging gifts, and talking about our plans for the new year. The atmosphere was jovial, the kind of scene you'd put on a Christmas card. It was the calm before the most catastrophic storm I could have ever imagined. It was when the plates were being cleared and the dessert was still waiting that Dad cleared his throat. a sound that immediately commanded everyone's attention in that room. He didn't use his usual commanding officer's voice. It was lower, almost a croak. He told us he had something to say, not a toast, but an admission. He paused, looking around the room, his eyes lingering on my mother, whose expression had now morphed from strained joviality to pure, gut-wrenching dread. It was clear she already knew, or at least suspected, what was coming. Dad took a deep breath, and he started to speak about his first deployment to Germany in 1990. He said he was young, full of fire, and maybe a little reckless. He met a woman, a local German national, an interpreter working with the base. He described her with a tenderness that was so foreign on his face, calling her a force of nature. Someone who saw past the uniform to the scared kid underneath. He said he fell in love, a deep, consuming love that made him question his entire future back home, where he was already engaged to my mother, Elena. He said he chose duty over love, which was the first part of the lie. He said he was heartbroken, but he came home, married Mom, and started our family. We had heard parts of this before, the young officer struggling with a difficult choice, the noble sacrifice. It was part of the family lore, a romantic tragedy that enhanced his reputation for honor. But then he dropped the bomb. He said that when he made that choice to return, he was leaving behind more than just a memory. He was leaving behind a son. He said the interpreter, Anya, found out she was pregnant shortly after he left. She wrote to him, not asking for anything, but telling him the truth. And he, the colonel known for his honor, made the decision to deny it, to cut all ties, and to never look back. He explained that back then, a scandal like that would have ended his career instantly, ruined his chances for promotion, and disgraced his family name. He convinced himself he was protecting my mother and us, choosing the greater good of his military service. But he said that every Christmas, every milestone, he'd receive an anonymous card with a simple note. He's well, and he knows who you are. He confessed he finally couldn't carry the weight of that lie anymore. And then he looked directly at me, his eyes pleading, and he said, "Your brother's name is Klaus. He's 34 years old, and he's in this country now. I contacted him." The silence that followed was deafening, the kind that absorbs all the ambient noise until your own heartbeat is the only thing you can hear. That's when Mom's plate hit the floor. The sound was a punctuation mark on the end of a sentence that had just ruined our lives. Sarah burst into tears, a raw, angry sound, and demanded to know why, after all these years, he was doing this to us. Asterisk to Mom, asterisk. David and Tom, bless them, just stood frozen in place, utterly irrelevant observers to a cataclysm. I felt a cold, paralyzing rage. All the pride I had for my father, the respect, the foundational belief in his character, was instantly replaced by this burning, sickening realization that the entire structure of my childhood was built on a deliberate, cruel deception. 34 years. He had an entire other life, another son, who existed parallel to us, and he never wavered, never even hinted at it. So that's the situation I was in. My perfect, respectable father, the colonel, had just revealed himself to be a moral coward who prioritized his career over 2 families. I had a 34-year-old half brother named Klaus, who was now apparently asterisk in the country asterisk. My mother was weeping hysterically, and my sister was screaming. I had to make a choice. Do I side with the woman who dedicated her life to him and was just publicly humiliated and destroyed? Or do I try to understand the man who made a terrible choice under immense pressure? Or do I just walk away from this whole mess? Before I tell you what happened next, what I said, and what my father finally did, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have forgiven him in the name of family, or would you have walked away from the man you realized you never really knew? I was the one who finally broke the tension, and I did it with a lawyer's precision and coldness. I looked at my father and I said, "You didn't choose the greater good, Dad. You chose yourself, you chose your career, and you threw away 2 lives in the process, your son's and Mom's. Don't you dare try to spin this as some noble sacrifice." He flinched, and I saw a tear trace a path through the rigid lines of his face. He said, "I know, son, I know. That's why I had to tell you now. I'm sick. Terminal aggressive cancer. I have 6 months, maybe less. I couldn't face the end knowing I hadn't made things right with Klaus." The air was sucked out of the room again. This was the final twist of the knife, the real reason he chose Christmas dinner 2025 as his confessional. He wasn't doing it out of courage. He was doing it because he was running out of time and trying to clear his conscience. My mother stopped crying and looked at him, not with grief for his prognosis, but with venom. "You waited until you were dying to tell us, to ruin the last few months we were supposed to have together," she whispered. Sarah, ever the pragmatic doctor, immediately started asking about his diagnosis, treatment options, and why he hadn't told us he was sick. He waved her questions away. The sickness was a secondary issue. The primary one was his hidden son. He then pulled out the old wooden box I had seen earlier. Inside, there were photographs, pictures of a blonde woman, Anya, and a young boy who looked uncannily like a younger version of my father, especially in the eyes. And then he pulled out a stack of letters, tied with a ribbon, all written in German. He handed them to me. "Klaus is a music teacher in Berlin. He's a good man. I asked him to come here. He's arriving tomorrow. He knows I'm his father, but he doesn't know about you, about all of you. I want you to meet him. I want you to tell him that his father loved him, even if he was too much of a coward to say it for 30 years. The next 24 hours were a blur of screaming matches, tearful apologies, and frantic calls to lawyers, mostly me, already planning for the fallout and the inevitable divorce. My mother insisted she wanted nothing to do with Klaus. Sarah was more conflicted, angry at Dad, but morbidly curious about her new brother. I, however, felt compelled. This man, Klaus, was an innocent party in my father's drama. He was a victim just like us, maybe even more so. I made the decision, against Mom and Sarah's wishes, to meet him. The next day, I drove to the airport alone. When Klaus walked through the arrival gates, carrying a worn leather satchel and a guitar case, I recognized him instantly from the photos. He had my father's imposing height and his slightly awkward posture. I walked up to him, and before I could introduce myself, he looked at me and said, in heavily accented English, "You must be Marcus's other son." That's how my relationship with my half-brother, Klaus, began. It was immediate, raw, and completely unexpected. We spent the next week talking. He didn't come to the house, which was still a war zone. We met at coffee shops and parks. He told me about growing up without a father, how his mother never spoke ill of Marcus, but always kept a small, framed photo of him in his colonel's uniform tucked away. He wasn't angry, he was just sad. He understood the military culture, the pressure, but he also lamented the lost years. He showed me a Christmas card he'd received a few weeks prior, the first one that wasn't anonymous, signed simply, "Your father." That was the signal. I realized he wasn't here to stake a claim on anything, just to meet the man who was dying and to see what his other life looked like. The climax was when I finally brought Klaus to the house, 4 days after Christmas. Dad was frail, confined to his armchair by then, but he straightened up when he saw his son. My mother and Sarah had retreated to the guest room. The meeting was brief and devastatingly emotional. Klaus didn't yell or accuse. He just sat beside the armchair and spoke to him in German, his voice soft. I couldn't understand most of it, but the tenor was one of peace, not resentment. He forgave him. He told my father that his mother, Anya, had passed away a few years ago, but that she had always understood the choice he made and had never stopped loving him. My father sobbed, a sound I had never heard from him before, and he placed his hand on Klaus's arm. He confessed how much he regretted prioritizing his career over his son and his first love. The aftermath was complex. My father passed away just 6 weeks later. He died with Klaus holding one hand and me holding the other. My mother and Sarah refused to be in the room, a decision that still stings, but one I understand. Dad had rewritten his will in his final weeks. He didn't split the estate equally 3 ways, which would have been the logical thing to do. Instead, he left the entire estate, the house, the money, the investments, to my mother, with the stipulation that she could never sell the house. To Sarah and me, he left equal, substantial amounts of his personal wealth, which was mostly his military pension and savings. And to Klaus, he left the wooden lockbox containing all the letters, all the photos, and a single, sealed envelope that instructed him to use 1/3 of his military savings, an amount large enough to be a down payment on a house in Berlin, to fulfill a dream he'd discussed with Anya, to open a small music school. He finally gave Klaus what he couldn't give him in life: recognition, history, and a future. My mother filed for divorce a week after the funeral, though it was a technicality at that point. She sold the house immediately, successfully arguing in court that the sale was necessary for her financial security, despite the stipulation. She moved to Florida, where she is now, and she still doesn't speak to me often, blaming me for bringing Klaus into her life. Sarah and I have made peace, but the scar remains. Klaus returned to Berlin, and we video chat every week. He opened his music school, the Colonel's Key, a nod to the strange military life that created him. He is happy. As for me, I learned that a person's honor isn't defined by their uniform or their accolades, but by the quiet, consistent choices they make every day. My father was a hero on paper, but a man who chose cowardice when it came to his heart. The military secret he kept for decades was finally revealed, and it cost him the peace he thought he'd bought with his lie. So, that's the whole unbelievable story of Christmas dinner 2025. I still look at the world differently. I still don't know who my father truly was, but I know who my brother is, and that's the only silver lining. I ask you again, was I right to embrace Klaus, despite my family's outrage? Like this video if you were on my side. If you think I made the right choice in connecting with my brother and trying to find peace. Subscribe for more stories like this, where I break down the real, messy drama of the Reddit world. Share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section, especially what you think of my mother's decision to sell the house. I'll see you all in the next story.